I'm Jim Cruiser, the Kenosha County Executive, and I'm glad everybody was able to show up today. We're here to talk about an issue that could compromise the public safety in our community. I'm joined here today by District Attorney Michael Gravely and also members of the family of Joseph Veit. This is Mike Veit, Ed Veit, Charlie Veit, Louis Veit, and Mike Veit. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to our District Attorney, Michael Gravely.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is really about whether the community can come together and oppose the parole board, which we understand sometime later in May will be attempting to, or will be ruling on the issue of whether parole will be granted to the murderer of Joseph Veit. And that individual is Eric Nelson, and we're in a position today where where the county executive and the family will be talking about a petition drive that is being set up, and the county executive and I as public officials are here to oppose any move at this point to release Eric Nelson on parole. The details of that discussion are really about the heinous crime that occurred back in 1985, a crime where Joseph Veit came home from work. He was shot by two separate individuals, including Eric Nelson, who shot him in the head. And the motive for that crime was simply material gain. And from my perspective as a prosecutor and a person trying to protect the public in this community, Eric Nelson's one of those rare individuals in any community who not only is capable of committing murder, but is capable of being an individual recruited to murder someone that he really doesn't know for simple material gain. Joseph Veit was murdered by an individual who was a foster child in his home for multiple years. He came home from work on a day where he was, of course, earning the money to feed and clothe that individual. And Eric Nelson had been recruited by that co-defendant to essentially gain the material goods of guns and the use of a car and some money they could steal. And so he was willing to assist and in fact be the primary person who committed the murder that ended the life of Joseph Veit for that small profit in his mind. If you're an individual who for material gain is willing to end the life of someone you barely know, you are the rarest of dangerous individuals in any community. And though that crime occurred more than 30 years ago, from my perspective, that is still an individual who shows and reveals his character as profoundly dangerous to the community. And that is a person we need to be protected from now, as we needed to be protected in 1985. The Parole Commission, when they consider parole on this case, will have to make a finding about whether the inmate, this is Eric Nelson, has reached a point at which the Commission concludes that release would not pose an unreasonable risk to the public and would be in the interests of justice. And I don't think there's any credible way to say that a heinous act such as this is one that we can now say, even with the passage of time, would not pose an unreasonable risk to the public. And so I'm here to oppose any release of Eric Nelson, and I join the Veit family and the county executive in asking members of the community to join us in that effort.
With that, we'd like to hear from Ed Veit.
Good morning. About a month ago, I received a telephone call, and it was somebody from the Wisconsin Department of Corrections who explained that they were considering releasing Eric Nelson to a minimum security facility and that they were seeking our input. I said I would call him back tomorrow because I was really stunned. I never expected to get a telephone call like this. The next day, my brother Charles talked with them and learned that Eric Nelson had already been moved. We were all even more stunned. This crime has affected our family profoundly since the night it happened 35 years ago. And our family has never been the same. We followed the process closely over the years, keeping in contact with the Department of Corrections, going to parole hearings, and writing letters to make sure that the man who killed our brother stays in prison. We still don't understand how this has gotten to this point. We just hope that the Parole Commission will listen to what we have to say. And I want it to be known that we are grateful for the support that we're getting from our friends in the community, and we're especially grateful to everybody at this table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. I am very concerned that Eric Nelson will reoffend if he is let out in any way. My priority as county executive is to keep the residents of Kenosha County as safe and secure as possible. The release of Eric Nelson will only serve to diminish that safety and security in Kenosha County. We want to send a message to the Parole Commission and help them do their job. You can see more information about the case at a blog that the Veit family has set up. The details are in the news release we're handing out this morning. We're encouraging people to sign that petition that will go to the Parole Commission. It's available online or in paper form, and the Veit family will have those petitions available. Also my office and the district attorney's office and the victim witness coordinators. We're aiming for 1,000 petition signatures by May 10th, and then hopefully more after that. I'm sending a letter to a mass list of elected officials in Kenosha County, Outagamie County, and Brown County, urging their support as well. Eric Nelson has been transferred to a minimum security facility between those two counties, and I don't know, he may be in the process of obtaining some sort of work release. Eric Nelson should not be released here in Kenosha County, Outagamie County, or Brown County, or anywhere in Wisconsin, or anywhere at all. He is a threat to public safety. This case worries me all the more because we've seen this happen before. Last year, different case. We know a man convicted of a brutal murder in of a Kenosha woman in 1974. Was just paroled last year. Busted down the front door, proceeded up the stairs, used his head and shoulder to push in the bathroom door, and stabbed the victim 17 times and left her in the bathtub. He is now released from our prison system to Texas under some sort of reentry program. Michael Kolnashenko. Over the last 20 years, as a state representative and as county executive, I've written letters, as others have, on both these cases to the Parole Commission, requesting these two individuals stay in prison. I will tell you, I can't tell you how disappointed that they're both, or one's out and one might be on their way out. The victims in this case was almost identical of how Ed Veit and Charlie Veit were notified in this case. They're almost identical in the language that was used. I asked Ed Veit, when he called me, to write down exactly what they said to him and who said it. And here's his notes that he gave to me on the Monday after that phone call. He said, the parole agent called and would like to speak with you and your family members to seek your input how we felt about Eric Nelson being sent to work release facility and eventual parole consideration. That was the message left. The next day, he got a call back. And correct me if I'm wrong. That there was a new development, and Eric Nelson had been already sent to the Sander Powers minimum security, and a parole hearing date was changed to later in May. signed by Ed White, his comments, because I wanted him to document that. Because when he told it to me on the phone, it was just like the phone call the daughter of the murder victim in this other case received last year in February. Something's wrong with the process there. We can't let, the horses, the horse is out of the barn on that first one. They're down in Texas. I want to keep the horse in the barn on this case. We can't let this happen here. This community doesn't want it to happen here. We don't want this to happen to the Veit family. Are there any questions?
Mr. Veit, what has this meant for your family all of these years later to have to continue to make this fight?
It's very troublesome. It's something that is on your mind, not every day, but different times in your life. It's just always on your mind. It just changes your life completely.
How much has it changed your life? Just, I mean, I'm sure it's night and day.
Could you repeat that?
How much has it changed your life and affected your life just over the years?
Well, it's just changed my life. It's just changed my life.
You're his younger brother?
One of his younger brothers. He was the eldest.
Take me back to that January 1985 when you found out that your brother was shot to death.
Well, actually, if you look at the blog, that'll tell you how we felt. I don't want to repeat that.
We have on the blog, the family has, that we've helped with, is all of the articles on that blog that you can go back and search. There's got to be 36 articles. Mr. Veit and I have spoke every year, at least every 2 years, that the family has to get little letters from elected officials and send up to the parole commission. And we've been very firm on our opinion every single time. To get a phone call that he's released to minimum security is shocking to all of us.
What do you say to those who say, well, he was just 16 years old at the time of the killing?
Well, Mr. DA.
Yeah, so what I would say to someone who says that he was 16 at the time of the killing is how rare it is in the human character to be capable of this kind of heinous act. And as I talked about before, a person who's willing to, simply for money, for a car ride down south, is willing to be in this brutal situation. And it's not an everyday 16-year-old, it's a 16-year-old, in this case, Eric Nelson, who had broken into someone's house and committed an armed burglary just before this incident. In fact, had been released on that other armed burglary, another home invaded with a weapon when this case occurred, and Joseph Veit came home to have his home invaded by Eric Nelson and his life ended. So this is not a one-time incident. It's not a blip in the life of a young person. It's a pattern of conduct. And frankly, the public in this community, this was a notorious case. When you heard 36 articles are available, you know that this case truly terrified the community, thinking they could come home and work from work at any day and face the same sort of threat. And the release of Eric Nelson, now in his early 50s, is certainly still an individual who would be a threat in this community. And for those who remember this case, and we're hoping that even more remember it after today, for those who remember this case, it is terrifying all over again.
Mr. Veit, what can you tell us about your brother? Tell us about your brother as a person. Foster dad, had taken many kids in through the years, right?
Joe was a good guy, and he had a big heart. And he had an affection for people that were down.
Over the years, took it 12 foster children?
I can't confirm that.
That was what was in the article. That's absolutely correct. And I think Eric Nelson was apprehended in Missouri with how many loaded guns in the car?
3 loaded guns and a pellet gun, so loaded, really ready for more violence to be done.
They weren't pellet guns, they were rifles.
4 guns total,
Yeah.
1 was a pellet gun, 3 loaded rifles.
It's been more than 30 years. During this time, any family members, have you guys ever met with Mr. Nelson? Just gotten that sense of he just hasn't changed and he doesn't belong to be out? Is that ever happened?
I have not met with him.
Your sister did.
Years ago.
Yes. Yes. And,
How frustrating is it for this to come up and be reminded, obviously you're reminded all the time because the pain doesn't go away. But to be reminded of this every couple of years, every few years with this parole, how frustrating is it for you?
It's almost like every 6 months now. It's very frustrating.
Why?
I think that's obvious.
this is one of the catalysts that changed the law, I believe, in 1988 with Life Means Life. Senator Andrew was heavily involved in that, State Senator Joe Andrea. At that time, and Mr. DA, you can correct me, he was sentenced to life plus 5, but under the system, means they didn't have to serve life. Now they do. So if the same crime was committed today, this wouldn't be happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a clear case where, because it's that old law prior to Life Means Life, a family and really a community are victimized again and again by having to consider this crime and consider the danger that Mr. Nelson would be. In the sentencing judge in this case, who presided over the trials, called what Eric Nelson did an assassination. I think it's very clear what the sentence would have been in this case, and that this family would not be suffering through this year after year after year under the current law.
He was adjudicated an adult at the time.
That's correct. Yeah, he was sentenced to life as an adult with the only sentencing structure available to the judge, who again called this crime an assassination. The only sentencing structure available at that time, before the law changed, was one where the Veit family has to relive this every year.
Just for clarification, are you all brothers? All of
We have press releases available for all of you here. Maybe we can get those handed out. And also copies of
The articles on the
some of the
website.
articles on the website, some of the most pertinent, and then also the 1974 homicide that occurred. Again, different issues. The notification was just poor form at best. Being told one day, how do you feel, the next day saying, he's been moved.
It's exactly correct. That's exactly the way we feel.
Do you feel as a family that you've been disrespected by the Department of Corrections and the parole system?
I don't know about disrespected. I don't think we've been listened to.
And I think today, we're gonna have the public join the Veit family, the district attorney, myself, and other elected officials, like the mayor and state representatives that are gonna be supporting this effort, in helping the parole commission do their job and keep Eric Nelson incarcerated. He shouldn't be in for another 6 months, or he should be in for a long, long time. And the maximum that they can put this off until the next time is what we would like done, so that this process doesn't get churned every 6 months. And that's why I think the public is, we're gonna shoot for 1,000. We will keep you posted on the progress we make on the signatures. And that's the point of today, is to bring this back in front of everybody's mind and say, hey, all right, get engaged, let the parole commission know what you feel, and keep this man incarcerated.
So what is the guy's status right now? He's in minimum security. Is he on work release?
Well, we aren't notified one way or another whether he gets whether he's formally on work release. So what I can tell you is that he's in a facility designed for individuals who would get work release. So he's at a minimum security facility. It's the Sanger, Sanger, Powers Correctional Facility, which I believe is in Green Bay.
Well, it's on the border of
Right.
Outagamie and Brown County.
Right.
I'm calling both of those county executives today and also sending them the information so that they're aware and can sensitize the parole commission and the correctional system of their concerns.
So is minimum security, in your opinion, an appropriate place for him to?
He was moved down to minimum security. He should be moved back.
When was
To
he
Mac.
moved, when was he moved to minimum, just?
On February 28th, in the AM, remember the day before they called in the PM to ask them how they felt. In the AM of the next day, of February 28th, they called back and indicated there was a new development, that Eric Nelson had been sent to Sanger P. Powers minimum security, and the parole hearing was moved back to the end of May,
So this year?
this
Okay.
year.
I just wanted to make sure that, get that clear.
Yeah. And again, I have copies of Ed's handwritten notes that documents the dates, because I asked him to do that. And there's the press release, and I have the articles here for you. I want to thank you all for coming here today.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Brenda.
You asked how it has affected our family. His mother and father, the day they died, went to the cemetery every day. We went through many Christmases, and this is all that they thought about was their son that was murdered. It's not like he got ran over by a car. There was a closed casket because they couldn't even show him. So that's how it has affected our family, 30 years. And I felt, when his mom died, I thought she's finally at peace, she's with Joe, because she never had a day's peace. So that's how it's affected our family, every one of them.
Thank you, Brenda.